memory is from when I was around 3 or 4 years old. I was being pulled down the street on a sled by my dad on a snowy day. It was a cold and blustery day, so I was bundled up in a snowsuit and a scarf. My dad was taking me for a walk down the street when suddenly our neighbor's 2 large dogs broke free from their chains and came chasing after us. When they caught up in their excitement, the chain somehow became wrapped around my neck and tangled in my scarf. My dad, trying to get away from these dogs and not realizing that the chain was tangled with my scarf, jerked the sled forward. The motion scared the dogs, and they ran in the opposite direction, taking me by the neck with them. So my first memory is of being dragged down the street by my neck by 2 large dogs, with my dad chasing after them and me, screaming and yelling at the top of his lungs for them to stop. My dad finally caught up, freed me from the chains, comforted me, and then gave the neighbors an earful. That was my dad, James Shaw. He was a protector, provider, and silent comforter my whole life. He would protect his children from the sidelines of life without us even knowing it. He was a man of few words, but was able to show his love for his children in his many acts of kindness. Although he was never able to receive a formal education, he provided for a family of 6 without a single complaint. Though, or maybe because he came from humble beginnings, he was a charitable man, giving monetarily when he could, giving his time when he couldn't. First, I'd like to tell you a little about his background, set the stage for the man he will become. Next, I'll tell you how he met my mom and started thinking about his future. Finally, I'll tell you how this man shaped my life. Now that I've given you a little glimpse into the dad I remember, let's dive into how he became who he became. My dad was born to teen parents in 1940. His mom was 16 and his dad was 18. His childhood was rough, as you can imagine. His parents were not ready for the kind of responsibility he brought to them, and they both resented him for it. The family was very poor, and because of the out-of-wedlock teen pregnancy, their families would not help them. The families forced them to marry and provide for themselves with no help from them. This caused great tension in the small family, and that tension was taken out of my father through mental and harsh physical abuse. When my father was old enough to walk, he helped build the family home, and he worked on their small farm. In the 9th grade, he was forced to drop out of school and help support the family, which had grown to include 9 siblings. Around 16, he couldn't take the abuse anymore and ran away from home. He lived with much regret about leaving his siblings behind, but he had to save himself. He hitchhiked all the way from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Cleveland, Ohio. This is where I'd like to tell you how he became a husband and a father. He was taken in by his aunt, but it was not a permanent situation. His aunt had a family of her own and couldn't allow him to stay for long. He needed a plan. He decided to join the Navy and gain some skills so he could get a job. He joined up and went to boot camp. When he came back to his aunt's for a visit, he met a young girl who happened to live across the street and fell in love. Her, not so much. After some coaxing and a few months of dating, she came around and they became engaged and married before he shipped out. This was the beginning of my family. When he finished his time in the Navy, the newlyweds settled into a cozy apartment and started a family. My brother was born in 1962. My oldest sister followed in 1966. After she was born, they bought a small house. This was huge for my dad, as he'd never owned anything that was just his. After the move came another baby girl in 1970, and then me in 1977. Now that you know some backstory, let me tell you why and how my father is an inspiration to me. Although he was a quiet man that rarely said "I love you" out loud, even to my mom, you knew he did. He would show it every day in the little things that he did. I was a sick child, and he would give up his lunch hour. He worked 12-hour night shifts 5 days a week to come home and check on me. He would set aside days to to take me places, once a year to a carnival, once a year to a fall festival, and to an apple orchard to pick apples. He was a man of loving actions. He donated a portion of every paycheck to a local homeless shelter, and he adopted a family every Christmas and provided them with a meal and gifts. He never mentioned it or tried to seek credit for these deeds. He made me understand that there is always someone worse off than you, and you should try and help in any way you can. Although my father came from humble, troubled background, he grew to be a man that deserved to be respected and admired for becoming a productive member of society. As a child, I couldn't appreciate the man that my father was. As an adult, I can look back at his life and be amazed. My father meant a lot to me, and I still miss him every day. George Herbert, a poet, once said, "One father is more than 100 schoolmasters." I couldn't agree with this more. My father taught me to be a hard worker, to show love in all that you do, and to give to others when you can. I learned all of this through one man, my dad, James Shaw.